Russia to react as NATO nears its borders, says the Russian Prime Minister Medvedev. He says here Moscow does not regard NATO's expansion towards its borders as positive, as Sweden and Finland are likely to join the Western military coalition. He said this is their own business, they are making decisions in accordance with the national sovereignty doctrine. But we have to consider the fact that for us, the NATO bloc is not simply some strange organization but a structure with military potential. He also added that all new members of the North Atlantic Alliance that are in Russia's proximity eventually do change the parity of the military force, and we have to react to this. Also, the issue of NATO expansion towards Russia's borders is also significant, as it has direct links to the deployment of missile systems or missile system in NATO member countries. Russia is upping the ante by sending its only aircraft carrier to the Mediterranean. So it says here they've upped the geopolitical ante by pledging to send a heavy aircraft carrier to the Mediterranean, as reported by the Russian news agent Interfax. Admiral Kutsinov. Heavy aircraft carrying missile cruiser is the only one in Russia's fleet, so its deployment is an unmistakable signal of Moscow's seriousness about protecting their regional interests, some of which are directly tied to the fate of Syrian President Assad and the Syrian port of Tartus. Russia is going to resume nuclear submarine patrols in southern seas. This is from June 1st. They plan to resume nuclear submarine patrols in the southern seas after a hiatus of more than 20 years following the breakup of the Soviet Union, the Atrocities news agency reported on Saturday. It says it's another example of efforts to revive Moscow's military. They're designed to carry 16 long-range nuclear missiles. It says to the southern hemisphere follows Putin's decision in March to deploy a naval unit to the Med that we just talked about on a permanent basis starting this year. Also, the revival of the nuclear submarine patrols will allow us to fulfill the task of strategic deterrence not only across the North Pole but also the South Pole. From June 3rd, Russia stations advanced missiles in Armenia. Remember, the U.S. just deployed some missiles to Jordan also a while ago to Turkey. We have German troops manning those. Russia has deployed in Armenia state-of-the-art ballistic missiles capable of striking targets more than 400 kilometers away, according to the Armenian Defense Ministry. Serbia and Russia to expand military and technical cooperation. They'll expand their cooperation with Serbia, says Russia's Chief of General Staff of the Army. The military cooperation between the two countries is good, but not exactly as we wish it to be, given our joint interests, says the Chief of Staff of the Serbian Armed Forces. Then we have Russia seeks Tajikistan to approve military base deal. So this is all I got right here. Russia has urged Tajikistan to ratify the agreement signed by them in 2012, which allows the existence of the Russian military base in the country. You still have the United States trying to vie for that Uzbekistan base. Also, Kyrgyzstan wants the U.S. out. They're going to allow their contracts to expire here shortly. I believe it's in 2014. I think it has more to do with show me the money, whoever's going to pay them more, not so much any kind of loyalty to ideology or anything. This is my website, Global Government News, if you are new to GGN. It's ggnonline.com, and on YouTube, DDarko 2012 and 2013 are my YouTube channels. So there's a whole news archive on there. You can subscribe by email, and I'd like to thank those who have helped me out recently this month. It was kind of slow last beginning of the year, and I understand from people, family, friends telling me about how hard the tax season really hit them hard as far as the repealing of certain things. So I do appreciate those that have donated recently. A Russian official says FBI missed Boston warning. So we've covered this before, but it'll tie into what I'm going to be getting here. I have a lot of news to get to. A senior Russian official said Tuesday that the Boston Marathon bombings could have been prevented if American officials had followed through with Russian intelligence. This is about tying the intelligence apparatuses together, the anti-terror apparatuses. Like what someone said in the comment board, you probably are aware that, Russia and the U.S., they really do have kind of a secret alliance. I think it has more to do with Zionist interest and stuff, but either way, Steven Seagal stars on Congress's Russia trip to probe Boston. Bombing could have been averted, lawmakers conclude. Says here that the action star is well connected in Russia and even offered to take the congressional delegation to Chechnya, although that trip was called off because of House rules prevented the lawmakers from traveling on his private plane. Russia wants Seagal to be face of weapons industry. Russia's looking at Steven Seagal to be the face of its weapons industry as it guns for first place on the world's arms market, military-industrial complex, I guess you can call it. You know, on a side note, everyone hails Dwight D. Eisenhower as some hero, some great person, because he warned, truthers like to do that. He warned about the military-industrial complex. Dwight D. Eisenhower was I'm sorry to say this because he ended up being a president, which makes it even worse, was an asshole. So he did everything he could to bring Patton down, who was bringing the atrocities to light about what the West was doing and allowing the Soviets to do to Germans. Also, he had his own little Holocaust that most people don't know of. So, moving on here, Steven Seagal. Who is Steven Seagal? Well, he's Irish, Mongolian, and Jewish Russian. NATO has no intention to up the presence in the Arctic. I've covered this before. This is from May 8th. No plans to increase its presence in the Arctic, says Rasmussen. Despite numerous countries' keen interest in the region's vast natural resources, you know what that is. NATO expansion and Nordics would force Russian response, says Medvedev. This is from April 6th. I was thinking of it last year, but I think it was this year because you're talking about Sweden and Finland again in regards to the expansion of NATO. So, and we just covered about Colombia in South America actually getting ready to join NATO possibly. So, and there's a lot of states down in South America that are kind of anti-imperialist. They like to be, outsiders like to call it, ooh, they're leftist, communist, socialists, or ooh, they're right-wing fascists. But when you ask those presidents there, there's been a huge change, a shift there. They're really just anti-imperialist. And so Colombia seems to me, along with Brazil, to be one of the kind of least anti-imperialist. Russia joins forces with Scandinavia to finance Arctic oil rush. Now, this is from June 4th of this year. Russia, Finland, and Norway are in talks to create a fund that will help pay for investments in the Arctic Barents region as part of a plan to gain access to billions of barrels of oil and natural gas. I guess that's one way to circumvent them joining NATO. Russia's new Arctic platform to cost $223 million, says the minister. The construction of a year-round Arctic research platform will step up Russia's presence in the energy-rich region. It's expected to cost up to 7 billion rubles, or about $223 million. This will mean Russia will have a year-round presence in the North Pole. It says we're able to create such a platform. It will be a breakthrough because other countries don't have these platforms. Everyone else uses icebreakers. Then May 23rd, just prior to that, Russia plans urgent evacuation of Arctic post as ice melts. Russia has ordered the urgent evacuation of 16-strong crew of a drifting Arctic research station after the ice floe that hosts a floating laboratory began to disintegrate. Of course, scientists point to increasing signs of global warming in the Arctic, which is being significantly affected by climate change, which it melts, which it normally does, just like the Arctic. That's actually been breaking records for record ice buildup, but they don't ever talk about that. It says here NATO rehearses for war in the Arctic. This is from April of last year. The Western campaign for global dominance has reached the top of the world. Russia's foe is America's, says GOP visitors. Russia has an enthusiastic and perhaps unlikely friend in Representative Dana Rohrabacher, the Republican leader of congressional delegation here, who said Sunday that radical Islam has the United States and Russia by the throat and that the two countries had better learn to cooperate. So, again, this is Zionist propaganda. This is them working together. So, Boston bombing, latest globalist pretext for U.S.-Russia convergence from May 23rd. Says, predictably, America's foreign policy establishment is claiming that the Boston bombing has presented a golden opportunity for the Obama regime and Congress to once again reset our relationship with Russia. One of them, is a spokesman for the CFR, began sounding the theme of the latest terror attack as proof that the need for more cooperation and convergence between U.S. and Russian intelligence agencies. Russian ambassador says Boston shows need for more cooperation. The U.S. and Russia need to share significantly more intelligence to fight terrorists in the wake of the Boston bombing. So, U.S. lawmakers have criticized Russian authorities for raising initial concerns 2 years ago about one of the alleged bombers, but then refusing to divulge many details to Americans about why he was flagged. So there you go. You got representatives from Zionist-occupied government in the U.S., Zionist-occupied government in Russia. You have CFR members. And who else? Oh, another one too, right? Says here, Trilateral Commission and that. What stands behind Zbigniew Brzezinski's idea to unite the West and Russia? He tries to prove the inevitability of this process in Strategic Vision, America and the Crisis of Global Power 2012. He assumes the world's center of gravity is shifting from west to east, therefore the West will have to unite with Russia in order to avoid global isolation. The new strategy should imply the plan aimed at integrating Russia and Turkey into the international system of the West. In the beginning of the article, it talks about how they're not going to be able to break Russia and China's ties, but it says some experts say Brzezinski actually offers Russia to ally against China. To be more exact, they say that USA offers Russia to worsen its relations with China rather than improving them with the USA itself. That's why Brzezinski wants to integrate Russia into the Euro-Atlantic Alliance before there is a Russian-Chinese union. In China, a U.S. official promotes military ties. U.S. National Security Advisor Tom Donilon, who actually just stepped down, pushed Tuesday for stronger military relations with China on the final day of a visit to Beijing to set a stage for a summit next month between Obama and China's leader. Kissinger says the U.S. and China to collaborate on globalist world order. In the video below, Rockefeller protege and operative Henry Kissinger calls for the U.S. and authoritarian government of China to work together to create a globalist totalitarian government. The challenge is how to build a world order for the first time in history on a global basis. We talk a lot about world community, but the fact is that there's never been a world community before, and he suggests that China and the U.S. collaborate on such an effort. Chuck Hagel rebuked by Chinese general over U.S. buildup in Asia. Confrontation over increased U.S. presence in the region comes days ahead of Obama's meeting with Chinese premier in California. It says here, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel was challenged by a Chinese general Saturday to better explain the U.S. military's Asia pivot just moments after the Pentagon chief warned Beijing over cyber warfare. So obviously this doesn't have too much to do with cybersecurity. It has to do with economics, international economics. Japan to join U.S.-led military drill on capturing island territory from the 4th. Japanese Self-Defense Forces, or SDF, will be taking part in a California-based military training exercise led by the U.S., including Canada and New Zealand, from June 10th to the 26th. Dawn Blitz 2013 will be the first year for Japan to participate, as well as see all the involved nations have their troops take part in an amphibious assault training. India and Japan join hands to break China's string of pearls. It says despite Beijing's, aggravation or disagreement with it, India and Japan on Wednesday lifted their strategic convergence to a new level by vowing to work together for ensuring stability in the Asia-Pacific region in the face of growing muscle flexing by China. I don't know if that's really true, but Afghanistan, I'm talking about the muscle flexing. It says here, Afghanistan Pentagon has no idea what 108,000 contractors are doing. The number of contractors working in the country now vastly outnumber American troops stationed there. It says here they're unable to properly document the work these contractors are doing. So talk about fraud. Afghan protesters demand U.S. arrest troops over torture and killings. Wardak province protesters block key highway. They turned out in force in the province today carrying, this is from the 4th yesterday, carrying the freshly exhumed bodies of 3 more victims of the Special Forces torture scandal that has been rocking the Nurk district, where villagers say U.S. troops routinely raided them, basically kidnapped them. They call them nocturnal raids and kidnapped civilians, basically torturing them to death, and they dumped the bodies in a ditch just off base. So if people say, oh, that's in Afghanistan, so what? It doesn't affect me. Well, this is training, just like the pain ray guns that they tested on the Afghans and this modern warfare. This is all training. It's almost as if they're done with the training, they have occupation, and, move on. U.S. soldier pleads guilty to Afghan massacre. You probably remember this, who was charged with killing 16 Afghan civilians in cold blood last year, has pleaded guilty to escape the death penalty. Remember I talked about this. The civilians that are around there said he didn't do it alone. There was a group of them, so he's taking the fall to avoid a death penalty. I would have rather just taken the death penalty, but hey. British soldiers punished for abusing Afghan civilians. One British soldier has been fined and another has had his rank reduced at court martial after admitting abusing civilians in Afghanistan. It says here, sexually assaulting him. NATO commanders denounced in Spain for committing war crimes. Human Rights Association in Spain has denounced 5 NATO commanders of the U.S.-led International Security Assistance Force, or ISAF, in Afghanistan for committing war crimes in the war-torn country. Accidental blast kills 8 militants in southern Afghanistan. 8 Taliban militants have been killed and others severely injured when their explosive devices went off prematurely. Suicide bomber botches attack in Mali. A suicide bomber blew himself up, caused no other casualties in the Malian town. This is GGN, and I'm Darko. Thank you.